Hello, hello, hello. Excuse me. Welcome in, welcome in. God, I need some drinks. I'm so sorry. Let me know if you can hear me okay. I'm going to try and speak at a normal volume and not my normal quiet self. So, I wanted to go over a few things about Neil Gaiman. And if nobody has heard of Neil Gaiman, he is an author, and I think he was born in England. Sorry, let's do a fixed cushion. And he basically was my younger self's like not favorite, but like he was very influential. He did a lot of like darker child or like not child, but young adult dark books like Coraline. He wrote comics like The Sandman, Good Omens, American Gods. Like he is a staple in like gothic horror literature, basically. And I know that I don't know a lot of it because I'm still researching, but apparently his parents were Scientologists, and I think one of his his dad is like high ranking, but I'm not entirely sure. And I think his sister is stationed in the at LA at that location. I don't know how much he grew up in Scientology because they were public. They had a lot of money, so we know that people, especially children, are treated differently when they're public and they have a lot of money. And so what I know about his childhood and the way he describes his childhood, it doesn't seem like he really did much Scientology stuff. He rejected it. He probably was like some of the other people I know who were just kind of like maybe sent to a Scientology school here and there, but then considered degraded because they won't sign the contract, they won't participate, and that falls onto the parents, you know. So I know that he fully rejected Scientology, and one of his books is one of my favorite movies. I didn't read the book first, but Coraline. Coraline is still has a special place in my heart, and you know, I love Sandman. But when you when you abuse your power onto vulnerable people, including women, um, it's not good. It's not a good look. Um, how do we separate art from artists? I mean, I still love Harry Potter. Harry Potter has a very special place in my heart as well. But I grew up with the movies. I didn't grow up with the books. Stardust, yeah, Stardust. So Neil is a very influential person in literature and art. And for a while, I did like his second wife, Amanda Palmer. She is very problematic herself. And it turns out that I think she is definitely knew about all of his escapades and was enabling. And I know that they're divorced now. Not entirely sure why they're divorced. I hadn't really like looked that far into like their relationship. I mean, I saw it on Twitter when it was happening, and I know they have a kid. I met Neil Gaiman. He was nice, but you know, it was like just a meet and greet thing. And I've cosplayed Coraline, you know, and I have to wrestle with myself. Like, do I want to continue with that? Because I did get rid of all my Harry Potter cosplay because I still want to enjoy things, but knowing that I can separate that awful person from the stuff that I'm engaging with, I can be more aware of where I'm putting my money when it comes to that thing. But there's a lot of people who also are hurt in the process of one bad person who have worked hard on something, like a movie or something like that. So it's just that it's very complex. For me, it's not a very black and white. Certain situations can be very black and white. If you are this is one of the things about BDSM that I absolutely can't stand is when people who infiltrate BDSM or use BDSM as like, well, it is consensual, but you're still harming someone who isn't consenting to that. And BDSM must have consent, mandatory. All sexual interactions need consent. It's mandatory. If you're in an open relationship, consent, honesty, communication, and fairness. Hi, Carrie Ann. Sorry, I'm going on a rant. So let's look. Like I heard about these allegations a year ago, but was waiting for more things to come out. I don't know Neil Gaiman that much. So let me pull up this article and trigger warning, trigger warning, trigger warning. I don't know how much I'll be able to get through this because I have a therapy appointment soon. Let me share this with you. La la la. So this is I don't know where this actually came from. I think it's saved from a Vulture article, but I pulled it from the archive. I don't know when this came out. I don't know if this is the newest one. I think this might be the newest one. I hope it is. January. Yeah, it is the newest one. Just needed to make sure. Okay. Making sure everything is okay. God, I need me over here. There we go. That's better. Oh, no worries. Okay. Um, so one of the things that is very important when you're engaging in BDSM is safe words. If someone doesn't want a safe word, that's a no-go. That's a red flag. Like you have to have a safe word. But anyway, let's read this. Again, trigger warning. I think this is a pretty hard article to go through. Best-selling fantasy author Neil Gaiman hid the darkest parts of himself for decades. Scarlett Pavloch, or Pavlik, I don't know how to pronounce that, was a 22-year-old drama student when she met the performer Amanda Palmer by chance on the streets of Auckland. And Amanda Palmer was a musician. She was in the Dresden Dolls. I kind of loved the Dresden Dolls for a while. Okay. It was a gray, drizzly afternoon in June 2020, and Palmer, then 44, was walking down the street with actress Lucy Lawless, one of the most famous people in New Zealand, owing to her 6-season stint portraying Xena the Warrior Princess. But Pavlok, I think it's Pavloch, Pavlik, Pavlik. I think it's Pavlik, Pavlich. Oh God, I hate this. I need to know. Pronunciation. Why is it not Pavlovich? Pavlovich. Oh my gosh, that's a hard word. Anyway, noticed only Palmer. She'd watched her TED Talk, The Art of Asking, and was fascinated by the cult famous feminist writer and musician by her unabashed self-assuredness. On the surface, I'm just going to call her by her first name, Scarlett. Appeared to be self-assured as well. Local girl, she had dropped out of high school at 15 to travel to Europe, Morocco, and the Middle East on cheap, pausing in Scotland, where Tilda Swinton gave her a scholarship to attend her Steiner School. Wow, that's cool. And London to work in the cabaret scene. Eventually, her visa expired and she ran out of money. And so in 2019, she returned to Auckland, where she enrolled in an acting school and took a job at a perfumery. Pale and dark haired and wayfish, she favored bold colors and outrageous outfits. On the day she met Palmer, on most days, then she'd paint a triangle of translucent silver beneath her lower lashes. Why are we going through so? No, I don't care about those details. She'd been crying tears of glitter. It was Scarlett who approached Palmer on the sidewalk outside the perfumery. She was surprised when Palmer texted her a few days later. Amanda D. Palmer, she wrote, your new friend. Palmer, an obsessive chronicler of her own life in songs, poems, blog posts, and memoir, got her start as half of the punk cabaret band, the Dresden Dolls, but she was perhaps more famous for her ability to attract a tight-knit and devoted following wherever she goes. Yeah, she doesn't like to pay some musicians, so that's fun. In 2012, she became the first musician to raise more than $1 million on Kickstarter and later became one of Patreon's most successful artists. As Palmer explained in her book, The Art of Asking, part memoir, part manifesto on the virtues of asking for assistance of various kinds, she had built her entire career on messy exchanges of goodwill and the swapping of favors. Out of this mess, she argues, a utopian sort of community formed. There was no distinction between fans and friends, which is dangerous. I've also met Amanda Palmer as well. She actually came out to Seattle's Occupy Wall Street protests and performed for us and helped out a bit. But she's still not a good person. Over the following year and a half, Palmer and Scarlett occasionally met for a drink or meal. Palmer offered her tickets to her shows, invited her to parties for the Patreon community at her house on nearby Waiheke Island, a lush bohemian retreat. There's too many details. I just want to get to the meat of it. Come on. Sometimes Palmer asked Scarlett for favors, help running errands, organizing files, looking after her child. So she's basically kind of an assistant and nanny. Scarlett was happy to assist. She had a crush on Palmer. She didn't mind that Palmer only occasionally discussed paying her, even though Scarlett was always strapped for cash. Yeah, see, what the red flag? I just wouldn't, I don't know. It seems like it's a parasocial thing that got out of hand. She should have gotten paid from the get-go. Um, I don't care who you are, like, pay me. If I'm gonna, like, help you with things all the time, I would like to be paid. Scarlett, who was estranged from her family and without a safety net, see, vulnerable person, Palmer filled a deeper need. In November 2020, Palmer invited her to hang out at her place for a weekend with a group of local artists at the gathering. Palmer asked her to babysit while she got a massage early the next morning. Scarlett wrote a diary entry about the easy intimacy she'd felt in Palmer's sun-drenched home, where she'd read to Palmer's son, who was 5 at the time, their limbs entwined. The years absent of touch build up like a gray inheritance. The years absent of touch build up. Oh, okay. I'm hungry. I'm so fucking famished. So she was like, it sounds like she was obsessed. On February 1st, 2022, Palmer texted her and asked if she wanted to spend the weekend babysitting, which would mean bouncing back and forth between her house and her husband's. She had never met Palmer's husband from whom she separated, so of course she knew who he was. Neil Gaiman, the acclaimed British fantasist and author of nearly 50 books, including American Gods, Coraline, comic book series Sandman, whose work has sold more than 50 copies around 50 million copies worldwide. Gaiman and Palmer had arrived in New Zealand on March 2020, but just weeks later, their 9-year marriage collapsed. Gaiman skipped town, breaking COVID protocols to fly to his home on the Isle of Skye. Now he had returned and was living in a house near Palmer's on Waiheke. Their previous nanny had recently left and they needed help. Scarlett agreed and was pleased when Palmer offered to pay her for the weekend's work. I would be like, hey, what's the compensation for me doing this? Immediately. Around 4 in the afternoon, my feet are cold. I'm sorry. I just realized my feet are so freaking cold and I need to get socks. Have your feet ever been so cold they sweat? My feet are sweating, but it's like very unpleasant. And my feet are so dry, my skin is flaking. I really can't wait till winter is over. I want winter to be over. Yeah, I mean, helping a friend is one thing, but there is a limit. Yeah, for sure. Around 4 in the afternoon on February 4th, she took a ferry from Auckland to Waiheke and sat on a bus and walked through the woods until she arrived at Gaiman's house. The asymmetrical A-frame of so many. Palmer had arranged a playdate for the child, so not long after she arrived, she found herself alone in the house with the author for a little while. Gaiman worked in his office while she read on the couch. And then he emerged and offered her a tour of the grounds. Striking figure at 6'1", his wild black curls threaded with strands of silver. The author picked a fig, her favorite fruit, handed it to her. Around 8 p.m., they sat down for a pizza. Gaiman poured her a glass of rosé and then another. He drank only water. They made awkward conversation about New Zealand and COVID. And she had never read any of his work, but she was anxious to make a good impression. After she'd cleaned up their plates, Gaiman noted that there was still time before they would have to pick up his son from the play date. I've I've had a thought, she recalls him saying, why don't you have a bath in the beautiful claw tub in the garden? It's absolutely enchanting. What the? No, sir, no. She said that she was fine, but then ultimately agreed. He needed to make a work call, he said, and didn't want Scarlett to be bored. Gaiman led I'm not even gonna try to say it anymore. I was gonna attempt it again, but Gaiman led her down a stone path into the garden to an old-fashioned tub with a roll up and walk away, with a roll top and walked away. She got undressed and sank into the bath, looking up at the furry magenta blossoms of a tree. A few minutes later, she was surprised to hear Gaiman's footsteps on the stone. She tried to cover her breast with her arms. When he arrived at the bath, that he she saw that he was naked. Gaiman put out a couple of citronella candles, lit them, got into the bath. He stretched out, facing her, and for a few minutes made small talk. He bitched about Palmer's schedule. He talked about his kids' school. Then he told her to stretch her legs out and get comfortable. I said, no. I said, I'm not confident with my body. He said, it's okay. It's only me. Just relax. Just have a chat. She didn't move. He looked at her again and said, don't ruin the moment. She said, he looked at her again and said, don't ruin the moment. She did as instructed, and he began to stroke her feet. At the point she recalls she felt a subtle terror. I would have already felt terror. I would have felt terror with him being naked coming up to me. Gaiman asked her to sit on his lap. She stammered out a few sentences. She was gay. She had never had sex. She had been sexually abused by a 45-year-old man when she was 15. Gaiman continued to press. Oh, God. The next part is really amorphous, but I can tell you that he put his finger straight into my ass and tried to put his penis into my ass. And I said, no, no. Then he tried, oh my God. Then he tried to rub it between her breasts. She said, no. And he asked if he could come on my face. And I said, no, but he did anyway. He said, call me master. Oh, God, this is hard. He said, be a good girl. You're a good little girl. Ugh, gross. Gross, gross, gross. Afterwards, she crouched down in the water and tried to clean herself off. Gaiman looked at her, smiled. Amanda told me I couldn't have you. She recalls him saying, as soon as he had heard this, he knew he had to have her. I, I wish it were the good old days where we could both F you. Awesome. Good. Good. Cool. Cool, cool, cool. In the Sandman, the DC comic book series that ran from 1989, I'm going to take a second. And amorphous means fuzzy or unclear. Oh, okay. The Sandman, the DC comic book series that ran from 89 to 96 and made Gaiman famous, he tells a story about a writer named Richard Maddock. After Maddock's book proves a success, he sits down to write a second and finds that he can't come up with a single decent idea. The difficulty recedes after he accepts an unusual gift from an older author, a naked woman of a kind who has been kept locked in a room in his house for 6 years. She is Calliope, the youngest of the 9 muses. Maddox R's her again and again, and his career blossoms in the most extraordinary way. Wow. I do not remember this. Was it really in the Sandman? Because there was a lot of different versions of it, like different iterations that came out. A stylish young beauty tells him how much she loved his characterization bleh, of a strong female character, prompting him to remark, actually, I do tend to regard myself as a feminist writer. I'm sorry, sir, you are no feminist. You suck. If these things are true, you very much suck. His downfall comes only when the titular hero, the Sandman, also known as the Prince of Stories, frees Calliope from bondage. A being of boundless charisma and creativity, the Sandman rules, dreaming the realm we visit in our sleep, where stories are spun, older and more powerful than the most powerful gods. He can reward us with exquisite delights or punish us with unending nightmares, depending on what he feels we deserve. To punish the artist, the Sandman floods Maddox's mind with such a wild torrent of his ideas that he's powerless to write them down, let alone profit from them. As the allegations of Gaiman's sexual misconduct emerged this past summer, some observers noticed Gaiman and Maddox have certain things in common. Like Maddox, Gaiman has called himself a feminist. Like Maddox, Gaiman has racked up major awards. Awards in science fiction and fantasy, as well as dozens of prizes for contemporary novels, short stories, poetry, television, and film, helping make him, according to several sources, a millionaire many times over. And like Maddox, Gaiman has come to be seen as a figure who transcended and transformed the genres in which he wrote, first comics, then fantasy and children's literature. But for most of his career, readers identified him not with the artist who shows up in a single issue, but with the Sandman, the inexhaustible fountain of story. I know that this article is really long, so I probably can't get through all of this before I have to go. I think this is just describing the way he talks. I'm going to put this. This link is also in the description, so if you want to continue to read it or read the whole thing, it's there. I'm just trying to get to like the meat of the allegations. Just it seems like the way he talks, it just enamors people. I have never really felt that, and I've never really like watched him talk that much, so I don't know. This past July, a British podcast produced by Tortoise Media broke the news that two women had accused Gaiman of sexual assault. Since then, more women have shared allegations of assault, coercion, and abuse. The podcast Master, reported by Paul. Oh God, what are with these people's names that I can't pronounce? I'm so bad at this. Reported by Paul Caruana Galizia and Rachel Johnson, tells the stories of 5 of them. Gaiman's perspective on these relationships, including Scarlett, of course, he says they're entirely consensual. I spoke with 4 of those women along with 4 others whose stories share elements with theirs. I also reviewed contemporary diary entries. I reviewed diary entries, texts, and emails with friends, messages between Gaiman and the women, and police correspondence. Most of the women were in their 20s when they met Gaiman. The youngest was 18. 2 of them worked for him. 5 were his fans. With one exception, an allegation of forcible kissing from 1986 when Gaiman was in his mid-20s. The stories take place when Gaiman was in his 40s or older, a period in which he lived among the US, the UK, and New Zealand. By then, he had had a reputation as an outspoken champion of women. Of course, he was. Gaiman insists on telling the stories of people who are traditionally marginalized, missing, or silenced in literature. Catherine Kendall was 22 when she met Gaiman in 2012. She was volunteering at one of his events in Asheville, North Carolina. He invited her to join him a few days later at a. I think this is making me a little anxious. He invited her to join him a few days later at an after party for another event where he kissed her. The two struck up a flirtatious correspondence, emailing and Skyping in the middle of the night. Kendall didn't want to have sex with Gaiman, and on one of their calls, she told him this. Afterwards, she recorded his reply in her diary. He had no designs on me beyond flirty friendship, and I believe him thoroughly. She'd grown up listening to his audiobooks. She later told Papillon de Boer, the host of the podcast, Am I Broken? And then that same voice that told me those beautiful stories when I was a kid was telling me the story that I was safe and that we were just friends and that he wasn't a threat. Hi, guys. Welcome in. Welcome in. I see you also. Hi. I love when you call me Mandykins. I see you changed your name again. That's the only way that I'm going to know that you is when you say Mandykins. I know who you are. It's not an unusual trope, unfortunately. Yeah, that's true. At a reading 10 months later, Gaiman suggests that Kendall and 2 other girls wait for him on his tour bus. Oh my God. Oh, the stories I could tell you about when I worked with some celebrities. Some people, I could probably ruin some people in the industry. But I don't have a leg to stand on, so I can't really tell very many specifics. When Gaiman showed up, he pulled Kendall into the back of the bus and laid on top of her. He kept saying, "Kiss me like you mean it." Ew. She tried to get into it, but she was panicked. Eventually, Gaiman rolled off of her. "I'm a very wealthy man," she remembers saying. "I'm used to getting what I want." Years later, Gaiman gave Kendall $60,000 to pay for therapy in an attempt, as he put it, in a recorded phone call to make up some of the damage. Wow. Wow. Well, it's so nice of you. Yeah, just so nice of you to pay for my therapy because you hurt me. Gaiman had been having sexual encounters with. Oh my god, hold on one second. I'm so sorry, guys. It is hard for me to read this long. Uh, he had been having encounters with younger fans for a long time. Kendra Stout was 18. In 2003, she drove 4.5 hours to Fort Lauderdale, Florida to see him read from Endless Nights, a follow-up to The Sandman. She met him in the signing line. Gaiman sent her a long email and bought her a webcam so they could chat on video. Around 3 years later, Around 3 years after they met, he flew to Orlando to take her on a date. He invited her back to his hotel room, put on a playlist of love songs, and held her down with one hand. Gaiman didn't believe in foreplay or lubrication. Awesome. Cool. Cool, cool, cool. Yep, it would make that very painful. When she said it hurt too much, he'd tell her the problem was she wasn't submissive enough. Wow. Wow. He talked at length about the dominant submissive relationship he wanted out of me. Stout had no prior interest in BDSM. She says Gaiman never asked what she liked in bed, and there was no discussion of safe words or aftercare or limits. He'd ask her to call him master and then beat her with his belt. These were not sexy little taps, she said. When she told him she didn't like it, he replied, "It's the only way I can." No, 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 no. Stop. I don't know if I can read some of these details. It is a bit much. Gaiman told Stout he had been introduced to these practices by a woman he had met in his early 20s who had asked him to whip her PUSSY. At the time, he claimed to Stout he was such a naive Englishman that he thought she meant her cat. Then she handed him a flogger and told him to use it on her. This is what gets me off now, Stout recalls him saying. What? He identified himself as very vanilla in an interview? Oh my gosh. This is a lot, guys. In 2007, Gaiman and Stout took a trip to the Cornish countryside. On their last night there, she developed a UTI that had gotten so bad she couldn't sit down. She told Gaiman they could fool around, but any penetration would be too painful to bear. It was a big hard no, she says. I told him, you cannot put anything in my vagina or I will die. And then he flipped her over on the bed, he says, and attempted to penetrate her with his fingers. She said no. He stopped for a moment and then with his penis. At that point, she tells me I just shut down. She lay on the bed until it was. She filed a police report this past October. So, I guess on a podcast, he started talking about BDSM not being everybody's taste, but is lawful. It's only lawful, sir, when everybody is safe and consenting and communicative and there's safe words and there's limits and boundaries. Like what? The actual F. BDSM is not an excuse for you to do whatever the F you want with someone else's body. If you know nothing about BDSM, Gaiman's claim is that he was engaging in it with these women. That he was engaging in it with these women may sound plausible, at least in some cases. The kind of domineering violence he inflicted on them is common among people who practice BDSM, and all the women at some point played along, calling him their master, texting him afterward that they needed him, even writing that they loved and missed him. But there is a crucial difference between BDSM and what Gaiman was doing. An acronym for bondage and discipline and dominance and submission, sadism and masochism. BDSM is a culture with a set of long-standing norms, the most important of which is that all parties must eagerly and clearly consent to the overall dynamic, as well as to each act before they engage in it. This, as many practitioners, including sex educators like Dossie Easton and Janet W. Hardy, who wrote some of the defining texts of the subculture, have stressed over decades, it is a defining line that separates BDSM from abuse. And it was a line that Gaiman, according to the women, did not respect. Two of the women who never spoke to each other compared him to an anglerfish, the deep sea predator that uses a bulb of bioluminescence to lure prey into its jaws. Instead of light, he would dangle a floppy-haired, soft-spoken British guy. So this is the tub that apparently it happened in, and this is her. So I have 15 minutes before I have to go to my therapy appointment. We're not even halfway through this. So I think you get the point. And if you want, again, to read this entire article, because it is a good one, but it's very long. I'm sure there are other articles out there that are describing in shorter detail what the allegations are. This stuff is very hard to read, so I exercise caution. Please, please be careful with your mental health. Please exercise self-care after engaging in this kind of material. Yeah, limits, boundaries need to be discussed and agreed upon. It's not a freaking free-for-all. Exactly. So again, I put the link to this article in the description if you want to finish reading it. I got to go do my therapy. Yay, get my head shrunk. And at that point, the cake that I was doing earlier in the earlier stream should be cooled, and I can go and make the frosting for that. I might jump on and just film me doing the frosting and then pouring it over it because it has to set for a while, and the cake has to cool down. But anyway, hey, I would like to say, stop putting your penis wherever the fuck you feel like it without consent. That's my motto for today and my sign off. Consent, mandatory. No ifs, ands, or buts, or whatever. BDSM is not an excuse for abusing people. It's only consensual if everybody is consenting eagerly and clearly about their boundaries and what each act is going to be. And there's a safe word. Please remember this. Don't I know that there are a lot of like radical feminists out there that say that BDSM is just us women have tricked ourselves into believing that we like it and it's abuse no matter what. And that's not true. If you are going to engage in any sort of sexual activity, consent must be mandatory. If you're going to be in an open relationship, it must be consenting amongst all parties and be fair. I'm really tired of abusers stating certain things. Oh, well, it's this. So, oh, and it's that. So I'm not abusing people. So please keep your dick in your pants until it's eagerly and consensually wanted. Thank you. I sign off for now. Talk to you guys later. I know that Nora is going to be jumping on and talking about Neil Gaiman as well and like the whole Scientology thing. So I'm going to tune into that because she might know more about his Scientology ties than I do. I just found out about his Scientology ties and started researching it. So check you guys later and be safe, stay hydrated. Love you. Bye.